Hi everybody. So the first question was, what is rural social work? Um, like initially, before you even read it, you think of, oh, it's just social work that takes place in like a rural community. And I grew up in a very rural community, like a population I think of like 5,000 or less. At least when I was growing up, it's definitely gotten bigger since then. But I would have just described it very simply: social work that happens where there's not a lot of resources. And after reading the readings from this week, it can go a little more in depth than that. It was especially surprising to me where it said you can participate in rural social work. This obviously isn't the words, in big cities where like people have migrated and like been dumped into a big city. So that was pretty interesting. But I wrote a little note and just said rural social work is working in a community, as stated in the text, outside of a major urban center or cities. Um, a lot of times it is a poor community with less community resources and less access to services. Um, but it's important to consider where like that person or persons or community is, and accepting and recognizing and learning about their environment and their culture, which is like what we do with any client that we have. We want to take into account their culture and still be competent and learn and recognize where they're coming from and what resources they may or may not be able to get in contact with. But how would I explain rural social work? Just kind of like how I did. It's working with a person or a group, family, community, somewhere primarily that has less access. And where I grew up in that, I sort of have a very good idea of what it's like, because especially growing up and honestly still now, you don't have access in that community. I don't live there now, but there's very little access to therapy services. There's still, I think there is a DCS office, maybe, or at least there used to be. But if you're poor, you need assistance in some sort of way, it's very hard to access it there. Um, you don't really know where to go. And then with therapeutic services, especially, it's in the Bible Belt. So, I mean, you don't need therapy because you have Jesus. That was something I personally had to battle and sort of recognize, okay, that's not necessarily the truth. Um, you can be a Christian and you can believe in Jesus. You can lean on your faith, but you can also use therapeutic services. I mean, there is, I think, 3 therapy places in that town now, and one is truly just like all of the therapists are faith based there, because it is such a dense Christian community in the town. So, I mean, that's something that if I was to go back and work in a rural community like that, take into account, oh, this girl is having a lot of SI thoughts and really struggling, but if you try and approach her with that, she may be very against that, because no, like, I believe in Jesus and I don't need therapy. And sort of meeting them where they are and understanding where they come from and everything, I think, is very important. And then explaining it to somebody from a big city, that just sounds kind of crazy. So just trying to pull every aspect in and not being a scatterbrained as I am sometimes when I'm trying to explain things. But at a macro level, the best grasp I could get on it was, I mean, there is considerably less research coming out of rural communities and things of that nature. So, I mean, you don't have as much, can't use as much, I guess, maybe not evidence based practice, but as much literature to back up maybe what you're doing, or honestly just research to see into these communities without physically going there and working in those communities. Funding is another big thing that I put on my other little sticky note. Rural communities, I mean, if you are going to small farm town, I mean, they don't have the funds to create things to bring access to their community members. So, working on a meso level and a macro level would be working with community leaders, legislators to get funding to those communities for those citizens to get access to things, whether it be therapeutic services, whether it be family services, a community center, a whole office, just for someone to go, if it has a large homeless population, for the homeless population to go and have shelter and a meal and have someone there, hey, let me try and help connect you to resources, and just having the networking, both macro and meso, to get the money to where it needs to be. And then for micro, I mean, that's mostly what I've talked about, working individually, getting to know the client, getting to understand where they're coming from, try and be as culturally competent as possible, and working one-on-one with a child, an adult, a family, I think is really important. And I'm very excited to sort of get into this class just because it's so intriguing to me, because it's where I came from. I came from a very rural community. So I hope I provided enough examples and made everything make sense. But I look forward to listening to everybody else's videos, and I hope you all have a great weekend and a good Martin Luther King Day.